All right, we are live streaming.
Hello.
See, we've got 1, 2, Trace, 4, missing Sean. One, 2, 3, 6, Sean. 8. So just missing Sean.
Who's Barb Stevens?
Stevens.
Just joking. Oh, spicy tonight. Watch out.
I am actually, I don't know if you can hear me. I am currently packing for my trip to Maui tomorrow morning. So, yeah, a little busy. Multitasking here.
I like it.
Last minute packing to Maui? Come on now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
It's,
sad you have to go to Maui. So
Oh, look who's
I know.
talking, Marcus. And oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
Marcus.
here's my stuff.
Marcus never goes anywhere.
We're live streaming.
I heard live streaming, but it's not recording yet, right?
not record. Well, no, but
Okay.
it is 6 o'clock, so I'm probably gonna hit that button.
All right.
No, when we live stream, it's actually on YouTube this way.
Yeah. So we are live and recording, Mayor.
All right, great. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with this meeting. And today is Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. And this is going to be a regular city council meeting of the Lake Stevens City Council. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America.
Republic,
To the Republic.
for which
it
it
stands,
one nation, under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty,
liberty,
and justice for all.
justice for all.
Excellent. City clerk, you can do a roll call.
All right. Hold on just a second. Just bringing one more person in. Okay. Councilmember Daughtry? Councilmember Daughtry?
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Peter Shagan?
Present.
Councilmember Frederick?
Present.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad?
I'm here.
Councilmember Ewing?
Present.
Councilmember Tagent?
Present.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. And so with that, Council President, can we get an agenda, please?
There are a couple of changes to the agenda, but I'll go to the rest of the council first. Does anybody else have any changes that they think they need to make to the agenda? Okay, seeing nobody blinking the wrong way, I will say that we are going to be adding an agenda item for consent to bring Mr. McManus, Brian McManus, to change from the Salary Commission to the Civil Service Commission, effective immediately. So we can get some civil service work done. And I want to remove the Youth Advisory Council from guest business because they weren't ready to be here tonight. Are there any other changes that anybody wants to make? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
If there's no other changes, I'll move to approve the agenda with the changes as noted.
All right, first from Councilmember Tagent and a second from Councilmember Ewing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Pass unanimously. Mr. Mayor, you have an agenda.
Excellent. Thank you, President. So with that, we will move into citizens' comments and so I'll open up the floor to citizens' comments, and how we do citizens' comments is we will look for a hand raised or I think we can go hand raised. We don't have anyone on the phone here. So if we can go with a hand raised, if you wish to have citizens' comments tonight, and it'll be 3 minutes. When we recognize you, we'll bring in to the panelist section, and you'll have to take yourself off mute, and we will give you the floor for 3 minutes to speak to the council. So with that, is there anybody in the attendees group who would like to provide citizens' comments tonight? If so, please raise your hand. And I'll ask one more time, is there anyone in the attendees area that would like to provide citizens' comments? Please raise your hand. We've got Melissa. Melissa, let's bring Melissa over into the panelist section. He's got some background noise.
There he goes. Can you hear me now?
We've got you, Melissa. You got
Okay.
3 minutes. You have the floor.
Well, I want to say thank you to both the city and Snow Isle for working so hard on the Civic Center planning. I'm very impressed with the outreach you did with the community this time around. You know, just really taking the time necessary to hear what people have to say. And hopefully you guys were able to read all the comments. I heard there were a lot. And I really hope when you make a decision on moving forward, you take into account everything that the community brought to you, their concerns, their hopes. I know personally I'm hoping for something that definitely includes outdoor space for kids and space for adults. And I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm really happy with the work everyone's been putting into this.
Great.
Oh, I forgot to tell you my address. Do I need to do that?
I think we're okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate your words. Is there anybody else who would like to provide citizens' comments tonight? Please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anybody else raising their hands in the citizens' comments. How about you, City Clerk Chellen?
I do not see anybody, Mayor.
Okay, perfect. So with that, we'll move on to council business. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with Councilmember Tagent.
Great, attended Veterans Commission, good little work meeting. Got a newsletter coming out, and the Veterans Commission definitely wants to get in front of the council in the next couple meetings before we go on our summer hiatus, and just make sure you know what we're up to, and we'll be doing a presentation for that. Other than that, just been seeing all the parks full in the community, and it really is a great thing. So good stuff. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Peter Sagan, I hit mute first, sorry.
Thank you. I have a couple of items that I would like to hopefully get support of my fellow council members on with some head nods. But Councilmember Daughtry and I, again, took care of some graffiti this afternoon that seems to be plaguing the south end of the city. And there's been a fair amount of chatter and so forth on Facebook that has kind of a group message, I guess you might say, of people concerned about graffiti and such, and identification of where it's at and things like that. And Kim and I jump in our cars, we run out there, and Mayor Gately's joined us on occasion, and try to take care of this before it gets out of hand. But it seems like it's a reoccurring problem. I think it's probably down to a couple individuals, but wondering if we could possibly initiate some sort of hotline, graffiti hotline or something that we could concerned citizen, have it on our website or something. If a concerned citizen sees these issues out there, that they could make a simple phone call. That way we could track it, hopefully maybe get the police department involved a little bit and see if we can kind of stem some of this in. The latest incident last night I cleaned up was the graffiti on Molly's bench on South Lake Stevens Drive, which just POs me beyond belief, but how somebody could do that. But anyway, nonetheless, it does happen in our community. So again, I just wondering if we could maybe get a head nod of some council members that would support that idea, or some other idea that we could have some sort of graffiti hotline that we can get these things stamped out in fast order. And I don't have a problem doing it. It seems kind of we're hit and miss and so forth, and just looking for a little more formalized approach to stamping this problem out. So with that, hopefully you folks would agree with that. The second item I have is hopefully a kind of a public information notice. We have the July 4th weekend coming up, and we've got some wonderful parks around our city that have been rehabilitated. Last year we had a unique situation where it seemed like the parks were fireworks central. And so hopefully we could get some reminders on our reader boards, things of that sort, that fireworks are illegal in the city parks, and that also the parks do close at dusk. But just kind of some proactive messaging, I guess, for our citizens so that we can kind of temper some of this. The folks that live immediately adjacent to these parks bear the brunt of what goes on there on 4th of July. And I just, I hope we could do a little pre-messaging for our fellow citizens to kind of remind folks that fireworks are illegal in the parks, and kind of take care of some things that way. Hopefully it'll tamp it down a little bit. So those are my two requests. Hopefully fellow council members will support those, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Peter Sagan. Next, I have Councilmember Dickinson.
First of all, I would like to say that I'm in Texas right now, and there are great parks here, and Lake Stevens has a standard to try to meet. So I'm challenging our city to do the same. Second of all, the fireworks is a real issue, absolutely. And we have never voted on that. We talked about it, bounced around, but we've never actually, as far as I know, we've never made a rule that says they're forbidden in the city of Lake Stevens. But I totally feel for folks that live near the parks, because it is really bad. And the graffiti is also, I think that's a great thought. I wonder if Chief Dyer, who has so much else to do, can give us some direction on that. But I actually, that's all I have to say. So onward.
Okay, Councilmember Jorstad.
Thank you, President Daughtry. I would like to use a couple of minutes of my time tonight to extend my apologies to the BIPOC community in Lake Stevens, in particular, the individuals who took their time 2 weeks ago at our meeting to speak out courageously and honestly about their experiences as people of color in Lake Stevens, and shared their fervent belief that a DEI&A commission is what is needed in our city to begin to address the equity and inclusion needs of people of color and people that live in marginalized communities. After those comments, Mayor Galey laid out his plan for his advisory council, and I quickly volunteered to play an active role in that advisory board. In retrospect, you know, I've been thinking about that a lot over the last 2 weeks. And after discussion, both with people of color here in our community, other trusted mentors that I have, I realized that by volunteering to participate in that board, I was agreeing to lend my time and energy to a process that our BIPOC community isn't supportive of, and a process that they don't feel a part of. I believe that in order for me to be an effective ally, I need to listen when Black, Indigenous, people of color, and marginalized members of our community speak. And then I need to act accordingly. So while I volunteered with good intentions, I now know that it was for the wrong reasons and it's not aligned with moving equity and inclusion forward in Lake Stevens. So I would like to rescind my offer to participate on the advisory board. I will continue to focus my energy in our community to further diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and I'll continue my work towards bringing a commission to the city of Lake Stevens. So thanks, appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Jorstad. Councilmember Frederick.
Thank you all. A couple of things. I also attended the Veterans Commission meeting last night. Really excited. Our newest members have some of the brightest ideas and most energy towards moving the commission forward, some of those activities. So really excited to see some of the things that are starting to happen and come to fruition. Not only the newsletter, but some of the content in the newsletter. If you've been driving around, you might have noticed the Purple Heart City sign that's been posted. I know that others are going to be going up soon, following up on some of that work that's happened from the city. So really excited about that. Last week, with much enjoyment, attended the Youth Advisory Council meeting. It's a great group of students. They also have a lot of energy and are moving forward rapidly, really trying to make an impact in the community. So really looking forward to continuing that work with that group as they really kind of pave their own path, recognizing that they are not a city commission. They're kind of doing their own thing independently. Lastly, on Saturday, I attended a business opening here in Lake Stevens, Gun Nation LLC, and had a great time there. I don't often get the opportunity because of COVID to attend many business openings here in Lake Stevens, but this one was very close, essentially walking distance to my house. So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to sneak away from COVID for a few minutes and partake in that, and had a great time. On the COVID note, and I apologize, this is probably more than I've talked in the past year. On the COVID note, we are approaching June 30th. I know that people are following very closely what that means in terms of restrictions and everything going away because of COVID. You know, this is the time where we really need to be the most vigilant as we transition. Earlier today in a media briefing, it was suggested that the fight is winding down, and the fight is not winding down. It is simply changing fronts. We need to make sure that we're looking out for each other's well-being, both physical and mental. We also need to look out for our community partners, our economy, make sure that we're supporting our local businesses as we start to put more and more efforts towards recovery here in Snohomish County and of the broader state and nation. So I just want to encourage everyone to take the time, do the right thing, make sure that you're being safe, and take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Frederick. Councilmember Ewing.
Thank you. Just wanted to recognize Sarah Jensen, our city staff that kicked off our farmers market this past Wednesday to start the new year. An outstanding job. There's just a ton of new vendors. We found a new favorite barbecue vendor, which is great. So I appreciate all the effort there. Also want to thank Tina Mandela from Volunteers of America for the outstanding work she and her organization are doing for our community. In talking with her, I gained a better understanding of some of the needs of our people here who are receiving their services. And I was surprised at what I learned from her, but she is just a tremendous woman who's contributing a lot to our community, and her organization is as well. Also, the Planning Commission attended last week, was really impressed with the conversation with the commissioners, non-conforming use and some of the other things that they discussed, and their thoughtful deliberations on that. So I'm grateful to have their thoughts and input from that. And just want to echo what Councilmember Frederick said about the Youth Commission. just extraordinarily impressive. And, you know, I jokingly said that they could probably replace our council and do just fine. They're doing really good work, and I'm glad that they're autonomous and that they're doing things their own way, because they're really accomplishing a lot of work and not being hindered by the city or the city staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ewing. Likewise, I attended the Youth Advisory Council, the Veterans Commission, and a few other things. I echo what Councilmember Peter Sagan says about the graffiti in our city. It's irritating to find it once. It's very irritating to find it a second time in the same spot a week or two later. I think that there's a pattern that we could probably break somewhere, and I would love to be able to find that break and get it taken care of. I don't mind going out and doing the work. I think it's work that needs to be done, and we'll continue to do that. But it really, it shouldn't have to be done by anybody. So the Molly Connolly thing breaks my heart. Anytime that we put up a memorial to somebody and then it gets defaced, that just shows a total lack of respect. And there's something wrong in our society to have people do that. And personally, I'd love to be able to talk to that guy or gal or whoever's doing it just for a couple minutes. And I'd be nice, but I'd certainly like to find out what's going on in their life. Community transit is taking up quite a bit of my time, obviously, because I am the board chair. We have a lot going on. We are fighting, trying to get people back on base, back into the office, having our board meetings in person here pretty soon. We're also waiting until July to find out how that really works. Looking to other jurisdictions to figure out how they're going to do theirs. Try to do it basically the same way, so everybody has, you know, it's coming off of the same playbook. And also the PSRC Transportation Board, which is coming up on Thursday. That's what I'll be doing this week. So thank you for your time and efforts for everybody on the council. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Lots of good work from the council going on out there. I'm not going to belabor too long. I do want to acknowledge the farmers market that started. Sarah's doing a great job. I know there's little opening day hiccups, but we did a little bit of refinement. We'll see how tomorrow goes. It should run a little smoother. The city is in dire need of any seasonals, people to work seasonal with Public Works. If you know any folks back from college for the summer or high school kids that just graduated, that would be a great opportunity for them to help out the city and its parks and getting things worked on. I've been working with the staff and trying to figure out, we have this ARPA money that we signed for today, and trying to figure out what's the best course of action for that money. And we'll be reaching out for some ideas over the next couple of weeks on that. So with that, I would like to take the opportunity to, Kelly, can you bring Miss Aquafest into the panelist?
Yes.
So this year I had the privilege to again judge the Aquafest pageant, which is just a great, just a really good opportunity to meet some great young ladies and ask them questions and get great answers and see some great personalities. And ultimately, we come up with a Aquafest queen. And so this year's Aquafest queen is Ocean Chapman, and she is just a great young lady. She's super bright, very talented, and so we brought her in tonight's meeting so that she can say a few words about herself and Aquafest. Ocean, we need to see you though.
Brett, this is Dixie under the Miss Aquafest, so she must be under a different name.
Okay.
So it would either be Deanna.
So I have a Mark Bosher that's not familiar. or Mike Jobs. It's
No.
not there. I actually saw her earlier as Ocean.
Hmm.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm not, you can see the attendee list. I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing her.
Okay, give me a moment. I will reach out to her. Sorry.
Okay, we'll table Miss Aquafest for a moment. With that, I think we do have so that's all the business I have. We'll see if Ocean can get back in here. And then we do have a city report from Troy. Let's do that.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, and so I left my laptop at the office because I was stuck up at Davies. But just the update on our cameras at the park. We've got the 2 cameras up at Davies Beach right now, and we're hoping to get started with the Northco Phase 2 cameras. So that's just moving along pretty good. We've been experiencing a lot of problems in the parks, and so I think this is going to kind of help at least get some accountability there. So just want to get you guys the heads up. We're going to have to get some messaging out there. I know Aaron has orders and signs to post out there for these parks, but that's what I have to offer.
All right. Thank you, Troy. Thanks for your work on that. That will make a difference.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing Ocean, so let's move to Barb with a finance report.
Thank you, Council. I don't really have anything to add to the report. I did just want to mention that the annual financial report is in your packet today. That is a requirement from the state auditor's office that we do present that to our legislative body once it is done. And then the financial report is for the month of April. And I just wanted to say everything looks good. Our revenues are coming in stable. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to let me know.
All right. Thank you, Barb. Dixie, any luck?
Yeah, I just called her. She said she was having connection issues, but that she was logging back in.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the Chief. Police Chief Awards.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I know as law enforcement officers and first responders in general, we work 24 hours a day to respond to emergencies. But I also know that without active participants in the community and people willing to get involved in their community, that this wouldn't be the community that we would want to live in. So it gives me great pleasure tonight to recognize 2 of our citizens who, for their service to the community. So first we have Lisa Neisinger. Did I pronounce it right? If you want to come on up. This is Lisa. She's here with her family. And this is from an incident last year. We were dispatched to Safeway for an unresponsive male down in the store. When the officers arrived at the scene, Lisa was in the process of performing CPR on this gentleman. The officers asked her if she wanted them to relieve her. She said no, that she would keep going. The officers got the AEDs, one of the AEDs from out of their patrol cars, and applied that, and it indicated that compressions needed to be continued. So Lisa continued with those compressions until aid arrived. Once aid arrived, they did get a pulse back and the person became responsive. In cases of CPR, seconds matter. And so the fact that Lisa was there and willing to get involved, we thank her for that. And I just found out that she just graduated from
the University of Washington Doctorate of Nursing program.
So she just graduated from her nursing program. So we thank her very much for her efforts. And we do have a certificate for her, as well as one of my cheat codes.
Oh, thank you.
So Lisa, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And the next is Chris Winters, if you want to come on up. Thank you. In this incident last year, a motorcycle was passing a crew that was working on the side of the road. And for whatever reason, the person on the motorcycle decided to do a wheelie, and very erratic and dangerous behavior, obviously. And one of the workers was standing in the open doorway of their truck, and the motorcyclist struck him, and both of them went flying. And both of them had severe injuries, including severe lacerations. So an officer did arrive, and Chris also arrived right after the incident and got involved. And believe it or not, can you hold up your pack? He happened to have a tourniquet with him. Both the motorcyclist and the person that was injured required tourniquets. And so Chris helped the officer while the officer was putting tourniquets on the one person. Chris was putting tourniquets on the other person, the person that was in the truck. And again, with bleeding of that significance, again, seconds matter and quick action is required. So for Chris's willingness to get involved and his quick thinking and happening to have a tourniquet with him, we thank him very much. So again, having citizens willing to get involved in the community is what it's all about, and we thank them very much for their participation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Great stuff. It's always good to see obviously trained citizens putting their training to work and helping out their fellow citizens in their community. It's great. Good stories. All right, let's move to Ocean. Jumped on, but she fell off. So we're going to go to Anya, Lean Graduation Recognition.
Hey, Kelly, if you could bring Lori Erickson in.
Anya,
yeah,
I'm going to pause you while we have Ocean.
Okay, pause.
You're paused?
On mute.
Yeah. Perfect. Ocean, can you hear? Are you there?
Yes, hi.
Perfect. Hey, Ocean, we would like to give you the floor for a few minutes. I had already introduced you, and it wasn't you, it was Miss Dixie, but we would love to hear from Ocean Chapman, the Aquafest Queen. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what the plan is for Aquafest this year, or the Aquafest pageant.
Hi, I'm Ocean. I'm big on making just change in our community. Just want to do whatever I can to help out, and I want to eventually end up in Peace Corps and just help out. I'm new at all of this, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just think it's really cool, and I'm just eager to make change and help out and all that.
All right, Ocean. Well, that's great. So if you're out and about tomorrow at the farmers market, Ocean will be with the court, and you can say hi to her and shake her hand and see how she's doing. Dixie, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say that this group of girls this year is phenomenal. It's amazing. We have a whole new group of girls. Ocean, their family has been part of the Miss Aquafest program for 8 or 9 years, I would say, but this was Ocean's first time ever competing. And she really put her heart and soul into practicing and learning interview skills and learning how to speak to people. And I just say that she absolutely rocked every part of the pageant itself. She has a lot of really great ideas. Her mom, her sister's also royalty this year. So they have a lot of really great ideas to get the girls out there in the community and kind of combine communities around us as well, whether it's pulling in Granite Falls or Snohomish to do service. So we're really looking forward to Ocean and her ideas of how to join the community together and make it better. So we have a lot of community service events coming up, and we're really excited about it.
All right, great. Good stuff. We appreciate you, Miss Dixie, and thank you, Ocean, for being here, even though despite the troubles of getting in, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, great. Let's move back to Anya.
All right, unpause.
Unpause.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure to welcome Miss Lori Erickson from Clappy Consulting, who has been working with the city staff on learning about Lean and Six Sigma principles and how we can apply that to continuously improve our processes within the city of Lake Stevens. So Lori's here today. She's going to do a short presentation on our journey so far this year in 2021 and recognize some staff that have just been through some formal training and just received some Green Belt certification, and then talk a little bit about where we're going to go with Lean and Six Sigma and principles in the city. So with further ado, Lori and Kelly, if you could give her permission to share, that'd be great.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to pull up my presentation here. All right, in presentation mode. Can everyone see it okay? Yeah, okay, great. Awesome. So thank you, Anya, for the introduction. My name is Lori Erickson. I work with Clappy Consulting. I'm very excited to be here tonight. And I'm only going to take a little bit of your time, but I want to go ahead and just take a moment to describe a little bit about who I am and what kind of work that I do. So I am a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. It's not quite as cool as it sounds. It doesn't come with a cool belt or anything like that. But what I do get to do is help people, help teams, organizations make processes better and help to improve workplace culture. So it's really fun. I've been doing this work for about 8 years now. I started in healthcare, and then eventually I branched into state and local government. I've done some work with the US Army. I've worked in higher education and also in manufacturing. So it's really, really fun. And I'll be explaining a little bit more about what Lean is here in a moment. I wanted to give just a note about what Clappy Consulting is. So it's a very small micro business. I'm located down here in Milton, which for those of you who don't know where Milton is, it's just south of Federal Way, kind of next to Fife and Puyallup. And it's a woman-owned enterprise. So I do have that certification as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump to it. So I know a few of you here in this virtual room know what Lean is. Some of you have actually practiced or experienced it. And some of you are like, Lean, what's that? So I wanted to take a moment and kind of lay a foundation so we're all clear on what it is that we're talking about here. So what is Lean? I want to start with a quick quote from the Lean Enterprise Institute, which, is that Lean is a way that we work to maximize customer value while minimizing waste every day. And so this is really what we're trying to do, is trying to get out the inefficiencies, the headaches, the things that maybe don't quite go as smoothly as we hope they will, in order to make our customers happy. And our customers here in the city of Lake Stevens are people like our residents, right? So residents, business owners, people who come to visit, consultants, all of these folks might be considered customers depending on the process, along with people who work within the city. So I like this quote by the Lean Enterprise Institute. They are kind of the lean gurus here in the US. And I wanted to dive into a couple of key points about Lean. The first one there in the bottom left is Lean addresses waste in a process. So waste can look like a number of different things. And oftentimes we can sense it, we can recognize it when we experience it. So it might look like having a delay in receiving something we were expecting. So that wait time is a type of waste. It can also look like we received something, but it had a defect. It needed something to be reworked, needed a little more attention before it was ready for us to actually use. And there's a number of other wastes out there as well. But one of the key points in Lean is let's try to reduce or mitigate that waste as best as we can. A great thing about Lean is that it can be applied in any industry. So obviously I've been working with folks here at the city, getting folks trained up on what is Lean, building up some internal capability there. But it can be applied absolutely anywhere. I started in healthcare, I've branched out, and it might look a little bit different depending on the industry, but it can be applied in many non-manufacturing applications, which is great. Next up, we have the heavy emphasis on workplace culture and behavior. Sometimes when people think about Lean or think about these tool sets, they think, oh, it's all about the tools. But really, lean is more about the people side. And that's one thing I really enjoy about this work, is getting to work with teams and having teams get really engaged in making their work better. Another great thing about it is that it's really inclusive. So it's designed to be this really inclusive tool set and mindset that really works with people, their ideas, and really trying to harness the skill sets that are within the teams. And finally, these are supported by kind of what I call the sandwich effect, which is where we have leaders who are basically supporting work that's happening at the front lines or at the right level. And we have workers, staff, and sometimes even residents, depending on how we shape this, who can be engaged and help with the grassroots ideas and actually rely on those experts to help us understand what's the best way to do this moving forward. And so it's kind of that bottom up, top down structure that helps to make lean really awesome, especially in government. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more around some of the structure with lean. So as I kind of alluded to, lean isn't just about tool sets. It's really, maybe about 20% of it is about the tools, about changing the actual processes and finding those efficiencies in the work we do. It's actually a way of thinking and behaving. And so if we think about the 80-20 rule, really the bigger lift here is really around changing how we operate, changing how we focus on new behaviors, and thus having an improved business. And these things are really supported with a third factor, which is an implementation of a management system. Now, you might be thinking, oh God, another system. I hope you aren't having that reaction. These systems can be very simple. They don't have to be overly complex, but they do focus on a couple of key things. And I'll pull up the picture here so you can see it. Oftentimes a management system, especially in government, will focus on some key metrics. So what's most important to the city right now? What's kind of that bigger picture? What are we driving towards? It also will have a human component, so a people component. So what things are necessary today to help us make sure that we're operating the way that we're trying to operate, doing today's work today. And it also has an emphasis on problem solving and keeping our improvements at the forefront of our conversations. So there's obviously the physical or virtual component here. It might be electronic depending on how we set it up, but it's really around having the right discussions with the right people. So we want to be sure we're including workers at all levels of the organization and getting customer input along the way. And then finally, this is the last slide on kind of this baseline foundational lean stuff I wanted to share. There are 3 principles that really help set the foundation for lean and help teams be successful when these are used. The first one is respect for people, and this is really the people doing the work. As far as how this shows up, it can show up, for example, as leaders going to the workplace and respectfully engaging with the workers. So we want leaders to really transition and become curious learners. We want them to try to understand the process as best they can. It may also look like, again, harnessing the ideas from people who work in the agency or work within the city. What great ideas do they have? How can we respect their time, but also get them engaged and empowered to make their processes better and better? So that's respect for people, very important. The second one is build quality in. So when we're thinking about making a change, ultimately, we want to try to design our processes and our workflows so that we can get first-time quality at the end of, what the change is after we've made that implementation. And what that will do is, again, help us to be able to have more capacity to spend more time, more energy, more effort on the things that our customers, whoever our customers are, to be able to give them more value, more of the things they really want. And finally, the third principle is continuous improvement, which is really around this endless cycle, this endless endeavor of trying to just continuously get a little bit better, and a little bit better. And so I wanted to share these with you just to kind of help you kind of see what is lean. Lean is really meant to be a very positive experience. A lot of folks find that it can be really energizing, really engaging. And really, that's another thing that I love and try to bring to the teams that I work with this as well. All right. So like Anya mentioned, I was going to do a quick kind of summary on the work that's been done so far between Clappy Consulting and City of Lake Stevens. So starting off, we started the year in January with some lean leader training. And lean leader training, if I had to summarize it, it's really around striking the balance with leaders and managers for getting our daily operations under control or just maintaining daily operations while also improving the business. So when we think about leaders, that's kind of their two major buckets is do the work today, but also think about can we make it better, right? And so what I have here is kind of a summary of the things that we talked about during our 2 half days together. The first thing, probably most important thing we talked about was the supporting mindset and behaviors for problem solving within their teams and across departments. As you can imagine, there's obviously opportunities to make work more fulfilling, improved, and so on within teams. But oftentimes it can get really sticky once we start to need engagement from multiple teams. So we talked about those dynamics in this class. We also focused on reducing waste. I like to teach the downtime acronym, and I've got that listed out there. We talked about learning how to see defects, understanding overproduction, waiting, not the highest and best use of ... That one's really focused around people, their ideas, and their skills. Also transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. And wherever we can reduce waste, it gives us that chance to increase our value to our customers. Also for this set of leaders, we talked about kind of skills and some soft skills as well for going to see the process as curious learners. So we talked about how to kind of set their teams up for success and how to kind of show up in that respectful way so they can learn what they want to learn and also be engaging. And then finally, we wrapped up this class by talking about A3 thinking, which is a small tool set for working through problem solving. It's based on the scientific method, and a supporting tool set called change management. Change management is really focused on the people side of change. So it's one thing to say, we're going to move this thing from here to here, but oftentimes people want to know why and what to expect, and they want to know the details and anything else to help them buy in. And we also covered a number of other key tools and concepts to help these leaders feel a little more prepared for this shift and this adoption of lean here at the city. Following that, we launched a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification. If you're wondering what Green Belt is, it's one of the many certifications in the lean world. It's kind of a beginner level. And then there's also Black Belt certification, which is a little more detailed. It goes into some of the more nerdy aspects around like data analysis, consulting skills, a deeper level of facilitation, and so forth. And so what this crew, I had 10 participants in this class, which was fabulous. We had basically kind of a review of the things that were covered in that lean leader training in January. Plus, this crew had to actually apply what they were learning to real opportunities at the city. And so we had, I think it's about 5 projects that are underway in various places. But it's really fun to see that work come to life. As far as what we covered, content-wise, we covered the Lean Six Sigma roles, so some common roles that are needed to help make this process easier. We talked about how to make thinking and processes visual. So we had a pretty big emphasis on facilitation and some tips and tricks all along the way on how do we help move a team from point A to point B. We also talked about gathering and analyzing data. So how do we know a problem is really a problem, and to what extent is that problem occurring? And then once we understand that problem, we need to do some root cause analysis to really get down to the nitty gritty. Why is this happening? And once we know that, we can start to think about what is it that we can do to make that root cause hopefully go away, or to at least help really reduce it. We talked about some Lean Six Sigma common countermeasures. One of those is visual management and daily management. I put that in quotes because sometimes it's not daily, but it's essentially that structure for teams to come to a visual place and have the meaningful conversations as a team. And we talked about strategies to sustain what is implemented and to help with that change management. The final thing I wanted to highlight for you all was we did a fun activity where we divided and conquered a great text here. This is one of the better books out there about lean. And each participant basically came together to share what was it that they found to be most useful out of that chapter and how might it apply here at the city. All right, it was about 9 or 10 weeks together, we were happy to be able to certify all 10 participants, and we see their picture here. So I'm very happy for all of them. They were a fantastic crew to work with. All right, so what's next with the city? So for those of you on council, you may be aware, you may have either read or have heard about the contract that we are talking about now with me to be able to stay on and support this work moving forward. I want you all to know that it is not my intention to be a permanent fixture here at the city. As much as I love you all, I really want to focus on building internal capability so that eventually I can basically step back and you all will be ready to take this on your own and continue developing your lean culture. So as far as what this continuation will look like is I will still be around to help coach these brand new green belts as they're wrapping up their projects and working on gaining that buy-in and implementation for those. I will also be supporting what the work will look like as far as the structure moving forward. So I've mentioned a management system a couple of times here, and that's one element, but I'll also be working to help the city document and develop what the best practices are. So like I mentioned earlier, lean can show up in a couple of different ways depending on the culture of the workplace, depending on the industry. And so I want to be able to help you all kind of document what is the Lake Stevens way? What is our way of implementing this work so we're not constantly recreating the wheel each time we want to do problem solving or do a lean design. And then also, I was able to teach a number of tools to the green belts, and some of them probably need to be refined. Some of them have multiple options. Some of them have some templates that are preferred over others. And so I'll be helping to make those refinements based on input from the participants. The final big thing here will start at some point in the near future, but it'll be starting to do our lean strategic planning. So what is that bigger picture? Are there any larger initiatives that need to be focused on, or how do we select work moving forward and prioritize that? And what are the next big steps moving forward? The final thing I want to wrap up on is kind of what's the so what? Why even invest in all of this work and this time and this effort? And before I speak my piece, I would like to invite one or two of our green belts who were in the class to speak up. So my question to the green belts, and I think maybe I'll pick on Jill first. What do you see as the benefits for continuing this work, and what are you most excited about?
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, I think the benefits are vast, actually. I think that lean emphasizes a clear plan that's efficient and reduces waste by focusing on that customer both internally and externally. And I think that the community can benefit by receiving a really predictable process when they interact with the city for business and for fun. And I think the staff benefits by cross-training and having standard operating procedures for each department. And also by having supervisors understand kind of the many facets of the work and the programs in their departments. I think what I'm most excited about is to see how lean allows for a more efficient workflow and how duplicative work can be reduced. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. Aaron, are you still on the call?
I am.
Awesome. Can I ask you to speak to the same prompt?
Sure, happy to. I went through the leader training and then through the green belt course, and so I'm quite lean. My green belt is smaller than it was before after all that fantastic training, where I appreciate it. I think that Lake Stevens takes pride in sort of operating with fewer resources, but trying to maintain a high level of service. And Lake Stevens continues to grow, both in increased density and through annexation. So we have several challenges, and we need a lot of tools in our tool belt to continue to maintain a high level of service both internally and externally. So in public works, there are a lot of opportunities as this community has grown to improve our processes. And I think lean is one of those tools in our tool belt that we can use to develop these procedures, refine them, if we do it in a consistent Lake Stevens way. And I think that's what we were working on as a group of 10 in the Greenbelt training. You know, it's really iterative and it focuses on continuous improvement. So I think it's a good tool for us if we embrace it. And that's always the challenge with things like this.
Indeed. Well, thank you both for your insight on that. I think all that I would add is that lean is really about, let's try to solve the problem first. Like, let's use our minds first and our wallets only when needed. And I've seen some teams do amazing work without spending a dime. And so that's one of the benefits to the city as well, is you can harness, all these great ideas, and you're probably going to see some really good return without even having to spend any money, which is fantastic. And again, this focus on trying to build internal capability, want to try to get people kind of trained up so they understand it, and also have it be simple enough so people who work within the city and engage with the city can embrace it and start using it, not only at work, but maybe even at home. So it's kind of a fun tool set that way as well. All right, I'm open if we have time. If there's any questions for me, I'm happy to take a couple. Or if we need to move on to the next topic, that's okay too.
If there's no questions, I would just like to say thank you so much to Lori and her work so far, and congratulations to all the Greenbelt certifications again. It's such a great accomplishment. I don't know if we went into detail, but it was 9 weeks every Wednesday morning. And I don't know about the whole belt thing, Aaron, because we had donuts every Wednesday. So for 9 weeks, I mean, I don't know if I'm feeling it. So, but thank you again. And I'm really, really excited to see how the Lake Stevens way of lean develops and the collaboration across departments in order to just provide fast and efficient services. I think Aaron just really nailed it on the head with, we are a lean city staffing wise, and improving our internal processes is going to help the staffing levels go just so much farther. So I'm excited. So, and thank you. And thank you, council, for all your support so far.
Well, I'd like to thank Lori also for her leadership in the lean training. I have come from a background of lean, Six Sigma, and continuous process improvement myself out of the Navy. And we were able to do quite a few things and save the taxpayers millions of dollars just in the 7 years that I was in black belt and lean and doing those kinds of things in the Navy. And trying to teach the Navy how to be more business-like is not an easy thing to do. And I'm sure that Lori had the same thing happen when she was trying to help with the Army. Yeah. War fighters are more worried about putting weapons down range than they are acting in an efficient manner, except for getting those weapons down range. And sometimes it was like, I don't know, I don't really have a good euphemism for that, but it was very hard. So Lori, thank you very much for what you're doing. I hope we can continue with you. And I really congratulate the 10 people that took the lean training, got to the green belt. I'm hoping that we can get a couple of black belts out of that because the black belts are the ones that are really going to help the entire team move forward. They're the ones that can have more information about the tools that can be used, and on the people side of the process, which is, as Lori discussed, about 80% of the battle, they're going to be able to help with the team building and things that are necessary to do that. So thank you very much, Lori. I'm really looking forward to what we can do in the city.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Lori, it's not just to throw out there, just one of the hands-on exercises that we did that everybody really enjoyed was a Lego exercise where it was an assembly process. And just to throw this out there, that the Lake Stevens team smashed the record. She's ran this exercise with college students, and their record was 24 completed Lego pieces without defects. And I think we pulled 37. So yeah, we nailed it. So it was very fun. Thank you.
I now have I wish I had a trophy for it, because if I did, it would be living at the city right now.
Absolutely. Until somebody take it away.
We're actually still using the Lego thing.
Yep.
Holy cow, I can't believe that. I thought somebody'd move on from that one.
I find it to be fun because it's engaging, and as adults, we don't often get to actually play with Legos, but it's so applicable to be able to come back to a simulation time and time again. So we really squeezed every ounce we could out of that. We had some other simulations too. We played with, we made tinfoil towers, and we drew pigs, and a number of things.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks.
All right, good stuff. Well, I appreciate it, Lori. Thank you for being here. I also took part in that training. It was very good training, and I'm excited to see the city move forward and create efficiencies for our taxpayers and our citizens. So with that, let's move forward with Ryan and introduction of NG.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. So before I turn it over to the headline act here, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. I want to remind that this is a newly created position for a full-time dedicated code enforcement officer versus a split position with a building inspector. I do want to again thank the council for that we are already seeing the benefits of a dedicated position. The daily inspection loads were so significant, it really didn't allow us to work the violations as effectively as we'd like when it was split with the building inspector position. That split position has been reclassed as building inspector only. Our inspector, Nick Ewick, just celebrated 1 year with the city, and during that time, he's obtained 2 new certifications. His residential plumbing inspector, and then just recently his property maintenance and housing inspector. So now we have Ingy Yarkut is joining us. She was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. She comes to us with over 20 years of experience in law enforcement and has worked in Snohomish County, Snohomish County for the most of her career, and she currently lives in Everett. So with that, I'll turn it over to the first-time code enforcement officer for the city of Lake Stevens.
Thank you, Ryan. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I basically, he gave you the gist of my life in a nutshell. So yes, I'm Canadian, go Canada. I've been in law enforcement for a total of 27 years, and most recently came from Everett PD. I was there for 6 years. I loved it. It was very different from the State Patrol, which is where I was prior to that, and did a couple different things with Everett. More recently, I was part of their homeless outreach team, which was very interesting, getting partnered with a social worker and going out and trying to address the homeless issues, which I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with, some of the struggles that Everett has with that. So anyway, I'm very excited to be here. I very much appreciate the opportunity for the job, and hope I can live up to everyone's expectation. And I just have to say that everyone has been awesome so far, and Lake Stevens is a lovely city. It's very nice to walk out the door of my building and have that gorgeous lake view. It's a lot different than the last view that I came from. So thanks.
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Just really quick, I had an opportunity to work peripherally with Angie. Good to see you.
Hi, Angie.
I'm super excited that you're here and part of the city, and I know you're going to do great things. So welcome. Great to see your face.
Oh, thank you. It's great to see yours too. And I was very excited when I saw your name because I knew there could only be one Angie Jorstad. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you too. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we have you, Angie, as well. Having worked with you in a past life, I know that you're going to do great work for the city of Lake Stevens and getting things done around here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? With that, we pass the consent agenda and we move on to public hearing. And it's item L, amendments to Lake Stevens Municipal Code 14.44. 0.097 marijuana facilities. David, you are up.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Gailey. Council members, David Levitan, Planning Manager. So we are here tonight for a public hearing for proposed code amendment to Lake Stevens Municipal Code Section 14.44.097 with associated amendments to Section 14.08.010, which is the definition section. This is related to marijuana facilities. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just for a short presentation, and then I'll be available for questions from council members. All right, so just a little bit of a background on city and state regulations related to the marijuana or cannabis industry. So the Revised Code of Washington, or RCW, provides for regulations for licensing retailers, processors, and producers within the cannabis industry. Among other things, requires a 1,000-foot buffer between marijuana facilities and a number of protected uses such as schools, parks, childcare centers, arcades, basically uses that have a lot of minors that are associated with those uses. Cities are able to reduce that standard 1,000-foot buffer down to a minimum of 100 feet via local ordinance if they choose to do so. Cities are also able to institute buffers on additional uses that aren't included within the RCW. Just a little bit of the legislative history at the local level. The city adopted marijuana regulations in 2014 and modified those in 2016. The original was pretty soon after Initiative 502 was first passed at the state level back in late 2012. And the city opted to adopt the standard buffers, which is 1,000 feet for the protected uses that are identified in the RCW. So just a little bit of an overview of existing marijuana businesses in the city. You can see those are highlighted in yellow. And basically, if you see that big green blob down in the lower left corner, that's basically where the 1,000-foot buffer extends from those parcels that contain those existing marijuana uses. So that's 1,000 feet that extends from the existing businesses. If you'll remember, we came before you, before the council back in, I believe it was on March 31st, so a little over 2 months ago. At that point, the scope of the amendment was a little bit different than what you're being asked to consider as far as the Planning Commission's recommendation tonight. So when it first came forward, the code amendment was a citizen-initiated code amendment. Basically, we had an applicant who had a business proposed within the Hartford industrial area. They got their local entitlements and then applied to the state and were informed that they did not meet the required buffer, that there was a family daycare provider located within 1,000 feet, actually about a little over 200 feet. And so the applicant had proposed a code amendment to reduce that required buffer between marijuana processing facilities and childcare centers down to 225 feet if certain conditions were met. That was discussed with the Planning Commission at a number of work sessions, as well as with the City Council. And then based on some feedback that we received from commissioners and council members, staff recommended modifying that amendment to also include a 30,000 square foot citywide limit on processing facilities. The city currently has a 70,000 square foot limit on marijuana production facilities, but there is not a limit on standalone processing. So that was something that was discussed, and there was generally support from the Planning Commission and the City Council. So we scheduled our public hearing with the Planning Commission for May 5th, and about a week before that, we were informed by the applicant that they had actually had their license for their processing facility approved. And what came out was that the state had revised their definition of childcare centers back in 2018, so that it no longer applied to in-home childcare facilities, in-home daycare providers. So what are called family daycare providers are not subject to that 1,000-foot buffer between that use and marijuana facilities. So the applicant submitted a letter requesting that the code amendment be modified to focus on the difference between family daycare providers and childcare centers, to note that while the 1,000 feet applied to these larger kind of commercial childcare centers that typically have more than 12 pupils, it did not apply. And then the Planning Commission considered that at their May 5th public hearing, had some additional changes that they recommended and requested from staff, which I'll summarize on the next slide. So as I mentioned, on May 5th, we held the public hearing for the Planning Commission, which is required for Type 6 legislative amendments. Staff provided an overview of both the original and the revised amendment. The commission had, a very hearty and a very good discussion of the proposed amendment. And they requested some additional changes at the end of that May 5th meeting, and then requested that the public hearing be continued to May 19th. They also reopened the public comment. They had received a number of people that provided oral testimony at that May 5th hearing, and then additional members of the public provided additional testimony on May 19th. So basically, at the conclusion of their May 19th continued public hearing, the commission voted unanimously to recommend a code amendment with the following changes as detailed in attachment 1, exhibit B of your packet for this item. So the three major items that are included in this code amendment are a new 1,000-foot buffer between marijuana facilities and family daycare providers. As a reminder, we currently have a 1,000-foot buffer that between marijuana facilities and child care centers, but it does not apply to these smaller in-home family daycare providers. They also proposed a 17,000 square foot citywide limit on standalone marijuana processing facilities. That was a reduction from the 30,000 square foot that was discussed at the council's work session on March 31st. And then one kind of last minute addition was a recommendation to reduce the existing 70,000 square foot citywide limit on marijuana production facilities to lower that to 54,000 square feet, which would basically coincide with the square footage of currently licensed marijuana producers in the city of Lake Stevens. So just a little bit more about the procedure and public notice. As required by state law, the city provided notice to the Washington State Department of Commerce on the proposed code amendment back on April 9th and requested expedited review, which was granted. The city staff issued the required notices for the public hearings for both the Planning Commission and the City Council, and prepared a SEPA checklist and issued a determination of non-significance under the State Environmental Policy Act. The city did receive oral testimony at both the May 5th and 19th Commission public hearings, as well as one letter, which was included as attachment 2 in your packet. So what staff is asking of the council tonight is to take action on the Planning Commission's recommendation. There are a number of alternatives that are highlighted below. As noted in the staff report, the code amendment does meet the approval criteria for land use code amendments found in the Lake Stevens Municipal Code. It meets all SEPA and public notice requirements. And so this being a public hearing, the City Council is asked to, following staff presentation and any questions, to take public testimony from members of the public that wish to speak at this public hearing. And then following your deliberations, to take actions on one of the following options. So the options are to adopt Ordinance 1119, which is based on the Planning Commission's recommendation. The City Council also has the option to revise Ordinance 1119 to modify any of the code amendment language to reflect any changes that the City Council would like to make. City Council can remand the code amendment to the Planning Commission for additional discussion. And finally, the City Council can choose to take no action on the code amendment, which would result in no changes to either section 14.44.097 or 14.08.010. So I try to make that as clear as possible. It's probably about as clear as mud, but I'm happy to answer any questions from council members, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
David, could you go back a couple of slides, please?
Yeah.
The one that talks about it going to Department of Commerce. So I'm a little confused here, and it might just be me. City provided 60-day commerce notice on April 9th with an expedited review granted on April 26th with no agency comments. Is that on the original code amendment, but it was from the source outside, from the citizen?
So yeah, so the April 9th, that would have been on the original code amendment, and Commerce does allow a bit of leniency as far as that they anticipate that there are going to be changes to code amendments. We did not renotice that to the Department of Commerce, but that's something that procedurally cities do not need to do when the kind of code amendments change.
So even if it's totally outside the scope of what was in the original code amendment, in other words, the opposite of what the code amendment asked for.
I would need to check on that to see kind of what the limitations are related to that. I don't know if Russ has any input on that, or our city attorney.
In my experience, you're correct that once you submit the amendment to Commerce, they're really looking at that original proposal, and then by statute you send them copies of the final ordinance as adopted. So I haven't experienced something quite like this, that the amendment has morphed considerably from the beginning to where it ended, but I'm happy to yield to City Attorney Rubstello if he has any additional thoughts on this.
I don't think we need to have any more thoughts on
Okay.
it. That answers my question. I'm fine with that. It just seemed a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit out of the ordinary that we would put this in, turn it around, and not go back to the Department of Commerce, because it sounded to me like Department of Commerce has something they need to say about it, and even if they don't say anything about it, and then we change it and don't send it back. So that if you're fine with it, I'm fine with it. It just kind of leapt out of the page at me, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, those dates aren't quite right. So I don't have any other issues with that. Okay, I'll wait for other comments. Thank you.
This is Angie. I have a couple of questions, or I'm looking for some clarification. The Planning Commission is recommending a reduction in the citywide limit from 70,000 square feet to 54,000 square feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And does that 54,000 square foot represent what we currently have, and so would not allow any additional expansion?
That's correct.
Do you have any sense of why that recommendation was made?
I think there's, I'm not going to speak for the Planning Commission. They asked for what the total square footage was that was currently licensed in the city, and staff provided that. And there was a motion made, actually a revised motion, to include this reduction down to the 54,000 square feet. I think in general, speaking for the commission as kind of a whole, from the 30,000 foot level, is that there was a desire for a greater diversity of uses within our industrial area, and also a general thought that there should be additional restrictions on marijuana businesses within the city. So I would assume that factored into the motion and the unanimous passing of that motion, as far as the recommendation. But I can't really speak specifically to any individual commissioners' kind of rationale for their support for that.
That makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I guess a similar question regarding the reduction of the, where did I see that? Not on the, is it the processing facility?
Right.
Correct. So yeah, the 17,000 square feet, which is a reduction from the initial recommendation from staff for 30,000 square feet, essentially. So the original applicant for this code amendment, it's about a 15,000 square foot facility, and there's currently one much smaller licensed processor in the city that's a little over 1,500 square feet. So that 17,000 square feet would also basically exhaust the limit on the standalone processing side of things.
So it would allow for this individual or company or whoever who you've been in contact with, it would allow for them to proceed with a processing plant, but would not allow additional processing plants after that. Am I correct?
It would. I mean, the original applicant was vested to the existing code that was in place when they submitted their application, and they were actually approved under that. So whether if the Planning Commission had recommended reducing the citywide limit on processing down to 2,000 square feet, it wouldn't have really mattered for that applicant because they were vested to a previous version of the code.
Okay.
So I'd like to point out that another thing about that particular point is that even if you had it less than the 17,000, let's say it was at 12,000, for instance, and we have 17,000 because it is a legal, what's the term, David? Non-conforming. It's legal non-conforming based on their vested. If they went to sell that business in the future, it would no longer be conforming. And the other issue that we have run into before as a council is to have a legal non-conforming thing happen, which affects them financially because they can't get financing, banking, those kinds of services or investments, because those investors are looking at them as a non-conforming, and how is that going to affect their investment? So the one time we made this mistake, I think Marcus would remember this. The one time we made this mistake 1 week, we came back 2 weeks later after we figured out that we really messed that up, and we changed the code again to make sure that that didn't happen, because it was definitely going to affect somebody adversely. Now, just to set the record clear, we didn't do it just for that person. We had to do it for anybody that could have been in that situation in the city. That couldn't be just for one person. You can't do that. That'd be, showing favoritism, and it just not allowed. But we definitely went through that process before, and I want to be, as well as I'm on council, I want to be careful we don't do that again. So I don't really like putting in, I'm not saying this is doing that, but I don't like putting in code amendments that are going to force somebody into a legal nonconformity. And this one's not going to do that. that to make clear, this one does not do that, but it does cap it right at the limit.
Didn't we choose the limit? Originally, it was kind of an arbitrary number, the 75. I think there was concern at the time that we were going to get way too many marijuana processors. And so we said, why don't we look at a number of kind of out of thin air of 75? And I don't remember, Russ, if that was the case or not, but we don't get as much tax dollars from that. And we didn't want all of our industrial space being used up for that. So for me, this looks like a step in a good direction to back that number off, just for the sake of saying.
Yeah, that's essentially correct. That originally there was a number when I-502 first came out. The city had adopted 100,000 cap for both production and processing. Some later state revisions, council wanted to separate out the grow operations, which don't have as much economic benefit, from processors and wholesalers that could have some more economic impact. So that's where that distinction was made. And then obviously the Planning Commission's recommendation would further tighten that number to represent what is in place today.
I really would like to see a little more diversity in our industrial district there, more than just marijuana type related ideas. So.
Planning Manager Leviton, question for you. When this discussion first started at the council, one of the components was the fees involved. At what point in time do we discuss that issue?
So the fees are kind of a concurrent, kind of related matter that weren't specifically related to the code amendment. I know when we brought it forward on March 31st, it was both a work session on this code amendment proposal and also kind of a general discussion of the fees. I have been less involved with the fees. I'd welcome Russ to provide, any additional comments as far as where we are at on that one. And I know that Mayor Gailey has been working on that as well.
So we're planning on doing a workshop on what day was it, Russ?
July 6th.
I'm sorry?
July 6th.
On July 6th to discuss the business license fees. And because of that, my recommendation on, and I know we're not there yet, but my recommendation on this tonight is that we continue it until we have that discussion, and so we have the full picture.
Just for clarification, City Council has sole authority to set fees. I believe it was discussed at the Planning Commission. This issue was brought up at the Planning Commission in my observation. And just for clarification, the Planning Commission is not involved in that process, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I too would like to have a little more discussion. I think the conversation about this ordinance is a little premature, since I think it's a total package deal, looking at the fees. And also, it was interesting how the conversation with went with the Planning Commission. Initially, it started with odor concerns, and now this ordinance, wants to have, the largest potential odor producing function of 54,000 square, but wants to limit processing, which has little to no odor. And if our code enforcement is in place, which we have now, we can enforce those things. But it went from addressing the distance between a business and the processing plant and a daycare, and then it evolved into something much different in scope, to where they were putting limitations on processing plants and such. So if anything, my recommendation would also be, in addition to the fees that were suggested earlier, that we have that conversation, that we marry in some way, if it's feasible, the alcohol guidelines for establishments that sell alcohol with the marijuana, so that there's some consistency between establishments. I know one of the concerns that has come up is people concerned about people accessing the processing plant. And part of my homework for doing this ordinance was to go look at the daycare in question and go to the processing plant in question. And not to single out a business, so there's a brewery just down from Lake Stevens Middle School, or North Lake Middle School. As I walk down there occasionally, I see much easier to access beers, leftover beers that are on the tables out there just up the sidewalk than it would be for someone to climb over a 6-foot barbed wire fence into a lock secured building to access marijuana. So I wonder if having those things married together, so the alcohol and the marijuana are together, and I think just having people look visually at those two businesses. I don't want to pick winners and losers between alcohol establishments and marijuana establishments. I think people have their own feelings about those things, but I guess the morality of it. But I would like to see that those businesses are given fair opportunity. I would support tabling this until we can have further discussion.
My understanding is the state laws are very different for those two establishments, so we can't, we don't have control over changing those or making those consistent, correct?
I can't, Angie, that's a great question. I can't comment intelligently on that, but during the planning commission, there was some discussion about the distance between alcohol establishments and what the guidelines are that sell alcohol and serve alcohol versus ones that have marijuana. And I don't have those notes in front of me, so I can't comment on it intelligently. So good point though.
I know they're different. I can't remember the numbers, but yeah,
If
I don't know that we
possible.
have any control over that. Do you, a question about the daycare, the imposition of a 1,000-foot buffer for home daycares. If there is an existing marijuana facility and a residence within 1,000 feet wants to establish an in-home daycare, are they not allowed to because they already exist within that 1,000-foot buffer?
So the in-home daycare provider would be able to open. They're not required to maintain a distance of 1,000 feet. It would not force the existing legally entitled business to go out of business. So basically the buffer is essentially a one-way street. When you're getting licensed for a new processing, production, or retail facility, you would need to meet that 1,000 feet if there were an existing family daycare provider. If you're already in business and somebody opened up 500 feet away from you, you'd be able to legally continue.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Remember, we still have a distinction between, at this time, we have a distinction between family daycare and daycare centers.
But this is stating that it wouldn't be, there wouldn't be a distinction any longer.
Exactly, yeah. So we'd be deviating from the state, which that's fine, but we'd be deviating from what the state definitions are.
And is this, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I would like to jump back on the agenda of the public hearing portion. Are there any other questions for staff? And then we can jump into deliberations after. I appreciate the great conversation, but let's keep going. Any other questions?
I do have one more question, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
So Planner Levitan, a question for you about is it as the crow flies, or the other term is like as you walk, or whatever the term? Because I did the route and it was just under a mile from the home business, home daycare to the processing plant, but I'm not clear if it's as the crow flies or if it's set, because I don't see it spelled out.
So as far as this code amendment, implementing that 1,000 feet would be from, it was intended as the crow flies from the closest part of the property from each of the two parcels that contain the two uses. And so if we need to clarify that more, we essentially basically just added in family daycare providers as another protected use, so they'd be subject to the same 1,000-foot buffer that currently exists for the other protected uses.
And so do you know if the alcohol regulations are as a crow flies, or is it sidewalk to sidewalk or door to door?
I would need to pull up the alcohol. I know that the applicant's representative had provided some analysis on the difference between marijuana regulations alcohol as well as tobacco. I can look that up maybe while public testimony is being provided, if there is any, and try to look that up and be able to address that during the deliberations.
I'm pretty sure it's door to door. Not to put too much levity into this, but have you seen some of our crows flying around here?
Too many.
Mayor Gailey, I did want to add that the applicant's representative is in the lobby tonight. If council would like to hear from the applicant of the original proposal.
Okay. Was there any other questions for staff at this point, Gary?
Just a quick question. If we're not to approve this tonight, is there an opportunity for someone to jump in and make an application for the extra 16,000 square feet of producer space?
Yeah, no rules are in effect. So any applications that would come in the next until council took action would be under the current code, which has no limitation.
So an application would be deemed vested.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, with that, let's move to, I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comments from the audience on just this subject. And I'm going to look for any raised hands in the attendees for public comments on just this subject. And you'll have 3 minutes. And I have Sue. Let's bring Sue in. Sue, you have the floor. Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me?
We got you, Sue. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Sue Fernall of Lake Stevens. I'm going to come from a different angle. I'm just going to come as a citizen, a mother, and a grandmother, because there's a lot of legal words in this, a lot of stuff that jumps around. I've driven out here twice. I've walked around it. Both times I've left with a heavy heart because there's a lot of language about in-home community, in-home daycare and commercial daycare. I'm here to tell you, as a parent of grandkids, parents, neighbors, when they're looking for a daycare, they don't look for in-home or commercial. They look at something close, something reasonable, and someone who's going to love their children like theirs. I'm very saddened that there is a difference, which means 11 kids in one home and 13 in another. These children are all the same to me. There's not a difference between 4 kids and 16 kids in my book. They're all children, and no one is standing up and representing them. I'd like to see this ordinance passed, 1,000 feet buffer for both, and end the 2 technical words, because in the future, it'd be nice to have a recreational center up there. Some other things people have talked about. And if we're going to jump around and use this kind of language, it opens the door to others. Come September, people are looking for daycare, get their kids back in school. You ask yourself, are they going to look at the difference of in-home or commercial if they live in that area? Because I talked to a couple friends up there. They didn't have a clue this was going on. So just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have any other public comment on just this subject? Looking for a hand raised in the attendees. I am not seeing it. Oh, I got a hand raised. Janice, let's bring Janice in. All right, Janice, go ahead and unmute and you have the floor.
Hello.
Hello.
You can hear me? I am Janice Huxford, and full disclosure, I'm part of the Planning Commission, so I don't want to come at you asking for you to do something that I've already voted on. But I'm also a landowner in that area and an employer in that area. I'm also a citizen, soon to be, of this city, and somebody that's going to be voting for the first time for our city council, I'm told. So my question to you is this: do some homework on this. If you need to park it for a little bit, sure. We've done our due diligence. As a planning commission, we've done our due diligence, and I'm so proud of what we've done. We made sure that we looked at everything that was brought forth from this applicant, but also what's going to happen in this city with whoever is sitting in these seats moving forward with annexations or with any kind of rezoning. If anything has changed right now, those repercussions are going to be forever. And I am very concerned, not just for where I sit on the corner in that area, but also some of the conversations that have been had with the last couple of months while this has been coming to fruition about making that a mecca for marijuana down that corridor. To Marcus Tangent's comment a couple minutes ago, you have a opportunity to have this be certainly what it's already is, but to bring in some different businesses there that are true employers, that are people that really are invested, that are going to sponsor your sports teams and that are going to be a part of this. And I'm concerned that you're going to concede too much. If this is not acknowledged, if Ordinance 1119 is not approved as Planning Commission sent to you, that the nuances are going to get a little too fuzzy, and we're going to allow too much in that area that we need so much in this city. So I leave this with you. I ask you please to support my business, my investment in this community, my future investment in this community, and my volunteerism on 1119, and to approve that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you for your work on this. Do we have any other public comments on this? I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So with that, I will go ahead and close the public comments portion of this hearing. David, do you have any further comments on this?
Yeah, I would just note that I looked back through some of the materials that the applicant's representative had provided related to alcohol. And so there's basically two tiers of regulations related to alcohol. Licensees from the Liquor and Cannabis Board on the alcohol side of things are required to provide notice to public institutions within 500 feet, so schools, transit centers. So that's just requiring to notify them that they've applied for a license. And then schools are additionally protected in that a license cannot be granted. An alcohol license a liquor license cannot be granted if it's within 500 feet of a elementary or secondary school. And that distance is measured via the most direct path via public right-of-way. So that would be not as the crow flies. It would basically be via public sidewalks or streets, whatever the most direct and closest route is. It would need to be more than 500 feet for that liquor license to be issued. If it's closer than 500 feet via that most direct route, closer than 500 feet within a school, it would not be permitted.
So David, you're saying marijuana is as the crow flies and alcohol is right away at the direct route.
Correct. Yeah. So they are a little bit different. And initially, the initial proposal from the applicant was when the assumption was that the 1,000-foot already applied to these family daycare providers, their proposed code amendment was to reduce that to 225 feet as far as the crow flies, as long as that most direct route via public right-of-way was at least 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I guess if this does get continued tonight, I'd be curious, the conversation we have in July that the mayor mentioned, it would be helpful for me to have information about which cities have regulations that are similar with alcohol and marijuana as far as right-of-way versus as the crow flies. It might be information that might be helpful for us in making decisions going forward.
Yeah, and we can provide that. And there are not many cities that have modified the standard state buffers. There are just a handful, and really, I think Seattle is pretty much the only one within Puget Sound. The applicant's representative did provide that very early in the process. I would have to look back through to see which cities have actually modified their buffers, and if any have modified them to reflect the family daycare provider, kind of the differentiation in the definitions for the two types of childcare providers.
Okay, any other further questions for staff? So with that, I'll open it up for deliberation of council members.
I would just like to voice my support for parking this until we have the conversation around the fees. I feel like to make a decision tonight wouldn't allow us to consider all of the pieces of the puzzle. And that feels like we started that conversation in March around, looking at the fee structure, and I think this all goes together. I don't feel comfortable making a decision without knowing that information and being a part of that discussion.
What can possibly be done to limit any kind of last minute application that would come in and circumvent what we're talking about here?
Council can adopt emergency regulations or a moratorium that would sort of freeze actions, but there is process related to that. We'd have to come back with a public hearing within a set amount of time and take action. So we don't have an ordinance before you tonight to do that, but that was really your only avenue would be an emergency ordinance or moratorium to stop this till you have the time to make a decision on this this matter.
Gary, can you talk, I'm sorry, Councilman Peter Sagan, could you talk a little bit more about your concern?
Yeah, certainly. Right now, our threshold is 70,000 square feet for processing, and there's 54,000 square feet that are utilized for that. So there's another 16,000 that's kind of hanging out there. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, and I think consistent with the Planning Commission, we've talked about having some different opportunities in the Hartford area. And by not taking action tonight, we're potentially going to expand in a backwards way the processing if somebody were to come forward. I mean, I could see from maybe a business standpoint, the existing processor, whether it's working for them or not, I could see them coming in and saying, hey, here's a chance that we can expand our business.
Sure. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
That's the reasoning behind it.
And if I could just clarify that 70,000 square feet is actually on production, not on processing. There currently is no limit on the processing side of things. And so basically there is capacity for up to about 16,000 square feet on the production side of things. And currently there's unlimited capacity because there is no limit for standalone processors. The majority of producers are producers/processors, because once you start trimming the plants and all of that, you need to have a combined license. Whereas the standalone processing, there can be kind of no growing involved. They receive product that's basically already been grown and a lot of times already been cured or trimmed or other ways.
So that leads to a question as to if there's unlimited capacity on processing, correct?
Correct.
Could we adopt this as a interim ordinance in order to alleviate some sort of rush at the door to get some vested applications in?
I'd like to hear from the city attorney on your thoughts with some of the more nuanced legal questions being posed.
Can't we always just adopt this and then go in and make changes? I mean, if we wanted to adopt it and stop it, we could just adopt it tonight and then set it for an agenda item to reopen. And when we get the fee structure, so if we have concerns, adopt it. We can always come back in and make the changes we want. This isn't set in stone. This doesn't mean that we can't open this back up and relook at it again, just for the sake of
Well, and it doesn't mean another council could open it up and we look at it again in 5 years.
Absolutely.
Sure. I guess
Or
my
1 month from now, or 6 months from now, whatever.
Sorry, Councilman Jorstad, if I could interrupt you. I just, my thoughts are with Councilmember Jorstad. I think I agree with her and that it's considering all the variables in the situation is important for me to make a good decision. And so I agree with her, and I would support tabling this until at least our discussion in July.
Well, I might like to return to that discussion that Councilmember Jorstad said about putting the fees with this ordinance. I don't think that the two are connected in any way. A fee structure for something can be brought up at any time. To be able to put an ordinance into place that is changing a code for regulating the size of canopies or how much processing we can do or whatever has nothing to do with fees. The fees are only wrapped around having a license to do business. So the only connection that I could see there is if we allowed it to go greater or unlimited, we would make more fees, but the fees are already set. We're just going to talk about increasing those fees. So whether
but it is relevant if we're looking at the impact on potential revenue for the city. And
sure,
if we're putting,
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, you're right. But well, I guess if you wanted to put that in that bucket, yeah, you're right. So I just don't. I see a definitive line between those two. So putting this in an ordinance into place tonight, as the Planning Commission brought it to us, I don't think has really much to do with talking about what we might want to do for fees in the future.
but it does impact, if we're putting caps tonight on how large facilities can be, then we've potentially, I think that's really short-sighted, not having the conversation around the fees and revenue potential for larger facilities. And until we have that conversation, I guess I'm just speaking for me personally, I don't feel comfortable putting a cap on a size of a facility, not knowing how that may or may not impact future revenue. So that's to me how they're connected, and that's why I'm uncomfortable making a decision.
Angie, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. My only thing is I don't want more of it in this area. So for me thinking personally, I want more diversity in that area. So for me, I think let's cap it. In my humble opinion, I think that's something that would be good for that area. So that way we're not this marijuana producer growing whatever you want to. I'm not very vested in it, but we stop this activity and put a cap to it for now. And of course, look at the fees. I'm very much on board with that. And I understand how the two feel very similar together, as I feel like I would like to see some revenue from this, as I think it's the producers. We don't see any revenue. The state sees it all. So here we are using up all of our industrial space for something we don't get any funds to help us with. Very, very hard for me to see all that space getting used up. But I totally agree with you as far as that space goes, wanting to know what the fees are associated with it. For me, the deliberating part is, are we going to put a cap on it? If that's important to us, I think Gary brings up a point. There's a lot of people in that area. And if this is something we want to stop, they could very easily jump in and put something in the next 2-3 weeks, which could expand their space and we wouldn't have any recourse. That would be my concern.
So we knew, and that's a good point. And I want to compliment Councilmember Jorstad. I mean, she's captured my thoughts very well, much more articulate than I probably could do. So thank you for that. But I think the applicant, the whole thing arose out of changing the boundaries. And I was morphed into let's change and cap the space. The applicant, if they wanted to, or any other person, knowing that there was no limitations, that I could have put in their application, weeks ago, knowing that there was a limitation, knowing that this was coming up, they could have put that through. So I'm belaboring the point. I'm in favor of weighing out the potential revenue options for the city with the concerns that were shared by our citizens. But the reality is I've lived here 15, 16 years, and I haven't seen any interest in that area for development. The only real development that's been in that area is an RV storage kind of area. The location of it is such, you know, real estate, I'm preaching to the choir because I know Gary and Marcus, you guys are realtor guys. The location. That's not a viable location that people are wanting to come into for these recreational facilities. I may be wrong. I haven't done a market analysis on it. But it's just not the access to it. The roads are narrow. It's difficult to access. And you guys have been on the council a long time. People aren't coming there. And $9 a square foot or whatever the number is that come up with the fee structure is probably going to provide a different level of revenue than a bowling alley or, you know, arcade store or whatever else may go there.
Hey, so just to keep the meeting going here, I want to close deliberation. I want to close the public hearing, and I want to move to get an action out of the council. Can I get a motion to either approve, deny, or continue?
I would make a motion to continue this ordinance until after the conversation around the fee structure.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I have a motion to continue this topic until we have the discussion until the July 8th workshop. And I have a second. Do I have any discussion on the motion?
For the sake of the previous reasons I've stated, as far as trying to keep our arms around this issue, I will not support that motion. I will be bringing forth a motion, assuming this gets turned down, to approve ordinance 1119.
Any other discussion?
I think that Councilman Ewing brought up a really good point. This land has been available for development, and we have talked about how it needs significant improvements. I would hate to make a decision that disallows interested parties coming in and developing legal business that is beneficial to the revenue for our city when, you know, without all the facts. So I would like to go ahead and table this, continue this, even though it might mean we have applications for this business between now and then.
Any further discussion?
I would hate to say this, but I really agree with Gary on this, supporting the idea of approving what the Planning Commission put forward. Just for the simple fact that I really want to make sure we cap this area. And I feel like Kim mentioned that it's not, we approve something, we change something depending on the fees we get for it. That's how this comes across to me a little bit. It's like, we'll approve it, but we want to have certain fees that come along with it. We need to set, I feel like these are two different issues for me personally, but I certainly understand the other side of the coin with that. But I don't want to get in the business of approving something under the assumption we're going to get money for it. We do it because it's planning. It's how we plan an area and how we do that. So that for me is just a little different thought process that we're going through right now.
I would, for the sake of the real estate discussion, I would add, I mean, the reason why you haven't seen anything in this area is there's no infrastructure to speak of to support anything out there. And the issue of a sole provider or sole user bringing the infrastructure, it's financially infeasible. So another method needs to be put in place. And I would ask Director Wright to confirm that, but I think the reason why you've never seen anything out there is the infrastructure simply is not in place to allow anything of significance to happen. And until we get a plan to do that, it's just going to sit there.
Yeah, that is a correct statement, that the infrastructure really hasn't supported the diversity of land uses. But I can assure the council, the mayor and I and other staff have been working on a plan that we know will have funding behind it to get that infrastructure analysis going this year.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, I think, why don't we have a roll call vote on this, Kelly?
Councilmember Daughtry,
How come I always have to go first? Nay.
Councilmember Peter Shagan,
Nay.
Councilmember Frederick,
Abstain.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Abstain.
Councilmember Jurstad,
Aye.
Councilmember Ewing,
Aye.
Councilmember Tagent.
Nay.
3 noes, 2 abstains, 2 yeses, so it does not pass.
Okay.
Would make a motion, Mr. Mayor, to support ordinance 1119 and the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a second. So the motion is to support the Planning Commission's recommendations, and I have a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. Kelly, again, please.
Excuse me 1 second, Mr. Mayor. If there's compelling reason to open this up again, I would support that. So, again, I understand where Councilperson Jorstad's coming from on the fees, but I do think they are distinct issues. But I would say that if there's something compelling, I would be open to discussing this further. So I'm concerned about a rush on the availability.
I would agree with that as well. The only reason I'm seconding this motion is so that way we can plan this area and get our arms around the area better. And I think there is a distinction between letting a project go in zoning and then the fee structures that go along with it. I think it's a separate discussion.
Any further discussion? All right, City Clerk Challen.
Councilmember Daughtry,
Aye.
Councilmember Peter Shagan,
Aye.
Councilmember Frederick,
Abstain.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Jurstad,
Nay.
Councilmember Ewing,
Nay.
Councilmember Tagent.
Aye.
4 yeses, 2 noes, 1 abstention. It passes.
All right, we have a passing. Okay, so with that, we will move on to an action item, Civic Center alternatives.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Council. I do want to just bring back a quick discussion with you on the Civic campus alternatives. Also with us tonight is Bob Stowe and Mike Jobs, who have been part of the project design team. We met about this a couple of weeks ago. Staff had given council an overview of the different alternatives for the site, as well as a quick recap of the public comments that we'd received to date. So as a recap, there were 3 alternatives that were suggested, and I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can refresh yourselves. Okay, does everyone see the alternative slide? So again, there were 3 alternatives. The first alternative was really dedicated to being a shared space. There were different metrics in each of the slides that showed different concepts or criteria, positives and negatives of the sites, whether it was agency partnership, environmental impact, cost, etc. All of those were ranked. And of these 3 alternatives, alternative 3 was the alternative that the public preferred. As well, you have the public's comments tonight, a lot of comments about the flexibility of the space, a lot of support for the library, for a lot of outdoor space, protection of critical areas, etc. At the end of the council's discussion, they had not reached consensus, but brought up a lot of ideas about different aspects that they did like. And from that, and also from some correspondence with Snow Isle Libraries, we worked with Miller Hull to come up with a hybrid option that builds off of option 1 with the orientation of the buildings, and then brings in the separation of buildings from alternative 3. Again, we don't know how this project is going to proceed between the two agencies, just on a planning perspective, funding, etc. And one of the big things that we talked about that goes back to one of council's earlier discussions is providing some incubator space. This came up in our public open house, that some other attractor would be good for this design. So this design shows a couple of alternatives for a cafe space to help enliven this space. And again, this really builds on options 1 and 3, but with separate buildings and a south-facing community plaza. With that, I know that Councilmember Dickinson had a couple of comments that she would like to share with the council tonight. She's been the liaison to this group. And again, we have Bob Stowe and Mike Jobs in the audience, and I would like to allow them some time to go over the concepts with the council and then open it up for any questions.
Are you ready for me?
Please.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for letting me speak. I'm sorry if this goes on a bit, but I feel this is passionately important to me. I have twice read all 44 pages of the citizen comments regarding 3 alternative designs of the Civic Center. I want to thank Bob Stowe and the staff, Claire Renshak, for laboriously putting them together, and also for asking the ages of those commenting and if they had children. That was very helpful for me to understand who these citizens were and why this whole process is important to them. I also doorbelled Lake Stevens for the library campaigns twice. And when I doorbelled for my own campaign, people did talk to me about the library, and I kept track of that. There's a lot of enthusiasm about this project. I entered into this whole process with an open mind, but admittedly, I had some ideas of my own regarding the focus of the outcome. However, I have kind of changed in that, in the sense that I believe the Civic Center is every bit as important as the library, and can serve to do some amazing things. The comments of the citizens land more often on the issue of a new library, no question about that. The majority of them like the idea of separate buildings, and I see here with this new design that they have kept that in mind. Yay. The majority of them were concerned about kids going to the library being in the same building as people coming to City Hall for city business. Just didn't quite feel like that was a plan. I hope we will support what they asked for. And it wasn't just the 300 or so people that made comments, but also the 400 people that responded earlier when they did an earlier survey. So that's really quite a chunk of people who are engaged in this. I also have come to the conclusion that these need to be separate asks as well as separate buildings. Plus, to save money, the library needs to be on one level. Both projects come with baggage. The library suffered 2 failed bond referendums. Here's some good news. Much smaller ask this time, not $17 million, $12 million. Both of the state legislature and Snow Isle Resources have already raised $6 million. So that is really a big difference. One of the things that people told me was they didn't want a Taj Mahal, and I hear that loud and clear as far as the library is concerned. The City Hall and Civic Center, the other problem is that it is not often visited, and citizens may not understand the needs for more space for city staff. And they already say, we already have a portable City Hall and a mill. They already exist. I believe we need more time to clarify this need for the citizens. And there's no question in my mind that our city staff needs more room to do all the hard work they're doing as our city grows. Will we prevent success of this dream by combining these 2 asks? I see a way forward that might work. First of all, get the library up and running. Note, this is a fact. Snow Isle told me this. People who live in Lake Stevens often go to Snohomish, Marysville, or Granite Falls libraries because they're bigger. They then shop there, so we lose the sales tax. I hope Matt Tabor's listening. People accept and use this new library. Shopping is right around the corner, so they're already on this piece of land. Shopping's around the corner, and they will become used to coming there. And looking across at the space that stands open, waiting for that civic center. I believe a library in that site will prove to people that this could be our new center. And one thing I can tell you from all my doorbelling is the broad majority of people live what I call uptown. They live up the hill. They live on the west side of town. And I think it's time for us for that reality check as their town grows. Maybe we need to recognize that. And I think that library could help make that civic center a reality as well. I just am concerned that the downside of waiting, of course, is that we really need that civic center. No question about that. But maybe it's worth the wait. Do it in a two-step method. And that is my thought from all the people that have spoken and all the experiences I've had with STO developers and strategists. Just a wonderful group of people. We're very fortunate to have them. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Want to walk through some of your comments on this revised design?
Is that me, Russ? You're asking that too?
Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed a beat there. Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council, and Mary in particular for all your input over the weeks and months we've been working on this, and Russ too. We've also had a good working relationship with Snow Isle, and I think everyone has reached a pretty good understanding of what each entity needs, and what we're hearing loud and clear and from the citizens is the need for flexibility, like Mary just articulated, to move forward either separately or together or at different times. And so what this plan contemplates is all those scenarios. So the reason this one looks in terms of layout a lot like Site Alternative 1 is because we felt like in looking at this closer over time that this outdoor public space facing south, is the place where you get the most sun. It's also the place where you can really see it from both Marketplace and 99th equally. Option 3, which did get the highest positive response from the citizen survey. Our reading of the comments in more detail really centered on the agency partnership level between the two. So what tipped it in the scales in favor of Alternative 3 was less agency partnership. So a greater flexibility in moving ahead alone. And so when we sort of take those comments out and thought if we could add that same flexibility to Site Alternative 1, we think there are quite a few advantages to the layout that Site Alternative 1 brings. Some of those are it's got less impact on the wetland setback. We think it plugs into that wetland mitigation area a lot better. So the backside of the library and both of these really will really be looking out into what will be the existing forest and the mitigation which adds to that kind of green space, as well as the office spaces in City Hall will be looking out there. So nice shaded, productive space. It won't be getting a lot of glare from the sun throughout the day. Typically that west elevation is the one where we really need to mitigate the sun, but if we have a big green belt over there, it's really going to do well for heat gain all day long. So there's a lot of great advantages to really looking out into that natural area, but then looking out and welcoming in the city as everyone goes by here. So we're also and I think that Chai Ross from Snow Isle really articulated it well in the letter he wrote, that while the library does need to be able to have the flexibility to potentially have to move ahead alone, if that's the case, they do support the idea of the shared public amenity spaces, the outdoor gathering spaces, parking, and as much site infrastructure, reuse of this existing vault, stormwater vault, all of that can share some costs, but also give people more reasons to come to this site. So we think that having these two entities in the long-term future, depending on how they come out, maybe they come out at the same time, that'd be great. If they come out at different times, and when this manifests into the full plan, there's just more reason for people to come to this site, which will really lead to a much more successful public space here on this side of the lake. A lot of reasons to show up here and meet your neighbors, whether you're going to the library during the day for reading or outdoor learning areas associated with the library, or the city spaces opening up throughout the day or into the evening as council meetings take place, or public open houses, or anything like that. All those activities will add to the hours of visiting here, and we think will make this a much more successful site than kind of spread out away from each other. I mean, on alternative 3, we did have a zone of shared space, which got a lot of good comments because of its connection to the green space. The issue we have with that is it's really pushing into the wetland setback quite significantly. But also, this space is on the north side of the 2-story City Hall. So that's really kind of the shady side of City Hall. City Hall will cast a decent sized shadow over that space throughout the day. Whereas site alternative 1, which we've kind of hybridized these two, really opens up to the south and welcomes people in from all directions. I think those are the main important aspects of why you're seeing the hybrid look a lot like alternative 1, but function like alternative 2. So the apparatus we're proposing would be a boundary line adjustment. As we got into further development on the design, that would probably move around, but this one contemplates a 25-foot space between the two buildings that could grow or even reduce. The side yard setback would typically be 10 feet in this zone. So 20 feet would probably be the absolute minimum you'd want to get close to each other and still not have a variance there. So this one contemplates 25 feet. We could go bigger than that. But what it does is it allows us to have an outdoor gathering space between town hall, or the council chambers court, and what we're calling the hearth room in the library, which is sort of the community meeting room in the library. Those can both open out onto this gathering space that looks into the green space and out into the public areas. And we can design that a lot of different ways. I mean, you could arrive that way for a town hall meeting potentially. Right now, we contemplated an entrance to City Hall here on the left, and an entrance to the library here on the south edge of the library, so you can see those entrances from each other. We think that'd be a kind of a nice way to really kind of bring those two together and see the activity from both happening throughout the day. And then we always keep drawing that beautiful pink granite erratic that sits there right now in the middle of the court and plaza to kind of give it a final resting place. Yeah, so I think that's the thoughts that I have from the architecture side, Russ. I don't know if there are any questions. I'd be happy to answer any of them.
I think that was a great explanation.
Oh, I do. I remember one more thing. I'm sorry. We have been asked to add a 1,500 square foot cafe space. And in this drawing, we showed it in 2 possible locations. We think there could be a third as well. I'll explain in a minute. But the one we prefer is in City Hall, in that it gives you greater flexibility that if the cafe concept is something you decide to move away from down the years, and City Hall needs to expand beyond the growth projections we have right now, it'd be real easy to knock the wall down on the 2/3 of this cafe and make it meeting space or more office space. Whereas if you do it separately as a standalone kind of retail island, I guess, which is a common typology out in these in areas like this, that wouldn't be the case. It'd be hard to reuse this as something other than a cafe. What we thought here was this kind of activates the corner maybe, but really just if you want to know our opinion, we really appreciate it being part of City Hall because it adds that level of flexibility in the future. There was also some discussion about placing it between the two buildings, which complicates the boundary line adjustment and all that. But if these became coming up at the same time and both entities thought that they could support the cafe, right now it's something being purchased by the city and not the library. But if it did become a joint project, it could kind of staple those two projects together, and you could have in the winter access to the cafe from within the lobby of the library and access to the cafe from within the lobby of City Hall. So that's another possibility that would come with some complications and limitations on the timing of all this. But if it did time out well, that's another place it could go that we discussed. Okay, that's it, Russ. Sorry about that.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Out of respect for council's time, I'll just ask Bob if you had any quick comments. Other than that, I'd really like to open it up to the council to hear your thoughts on this hybrid alternatives. And again, we are asking for a preferred motion from you tonight. So Miller Hull and Bob Stowe can move on with the next phases of their work on this project. You're still muted, Bob.
Just indicating that just in the interest of time, be glad to address questions that council might have.
Okay.
What I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see me, but what is the difference in cost? How does this compare to the other alternatives?
This one's going to be, because of the cafe space, additional 1,500 square feet and additional square footage. So it'll slightly increase that cost as a result of that. But beyond that, I suspect the cost will be very similar. We haven't gone back and revised the cost estimates yet, but I would expect them to be very similar as the other alternatives, but just with a bit of enhancement to the square footage.
Okay, thank you.
So Bob, if these are two separate projects, then what's the library portion and what's the City Hall portion?
Mike, do you have the breakout of the square footages of each?
They're real similar in size. The library is contemplating a range between 14 and 18,000. And City Hall, the two-story building, that is 18,700, I think 40. So the maximum library and the City Hall are real similar in size, around 18,000 each.
No, I'm not talking size costs. So because we're talking about doing two different projects, so I want to know what's the library standalone project cost roughly?
So previously, when we had both, it's about half of. We had a range between 26 million and 28 million. And so it's about, if both projects represent half the square footage, it would be half of that for the library and then half of that for the City Hall.
So for example, if the library came in at about the small end 14,000 square feet with the 700 square foot number that we've been working with, that's just under $10 million.
But if you did it as two separate projects, the library goes in first, City Hall goes in 4 years later, you actually have an increased cost because now you have additional setup fees, getting on the site, doing all those extra work. So the City Hall costs would actually be higher.
That's true. You not only have the escalation of just construction, but I think you will have some additional fees just for the construction method if they're done at two different times, because they're not taking advantage of some of the utility systems and HVAC systems on the building. And remember, you still have decisions in front of you about timing and construction and delivery method, which could change cost significantly. As we're indicating, cost could be anywhere from the traditional design bid build, $800 a square foot, down to a low of $700 a square foot if you were able to do a P3 delivery method. Now, if the project is separated and they're done on different timeframes, different delivery methods, that really sort of takes that ability to use that P3 out of the equation. But I think, the library also has some grant funds that they would like to be able to utilize, and they're uncertain whether or not those grant funds can be utilized if the city were to be the owner of the building, at least temporarily until the debt is paid off, and the library as a tenant.
But the decision we need to make tonight is whether or not the council likes this alternative, and we can talk about delivery at another.
Exactly. That was my point. Not to confuse things, but just to let you know that nothing you do this evening in terms of selection of preferred alternative eliminates any of those options in front of you.
I also want to say there's quite a bit of flexibility after this decision point, and after we put together a preferred alternative. Between the preferred alternative and moving ahead into the full design, there's a lot of flexibility here for being able to shift these things around a bit. The architectural expression will develop. So you're not going to get pinned into a corner by deciding to do this now. It's just going to allow us to take it to the next level to better describe this proposal to the citizens as you go out and seek funding for it.
So I guess at the end stage. So I guess the end thing in tonight is you want from the council which of the 4 alternatives that we want to try to move forward with. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. Looking at the first 3 alternatives again, and then this hybrid alternative, if there is a preference to come out of tonight.
So Mike and Bob, the question that I have on this, and I looked at this extensively today and yesterday, when you look at the comments, the 44 pages of comments, et cetera, and you said, Mike, that you had distilled some of those comments out based on whatever that criteria was. I don't remember exactly how you put it, that it really shifted it back from alternative 3 to alternative 1. Is that correct?
I think it's mostly correct. That what I meant to say was most of the comments that tipped alternative 3 in favor were all around the subject of how connected the 2 buildings were. And alternative 3 were the least connected. And so all the comments that were in support of alternative 3 were primarily saying, we like how these 2 are separate projects. We don't want them to get too tied up with each other and impact usage. Say, a lot of people were worried about the city hall taking over the library's meeting rooms and things like that. So once we took that topic, the separation out, there were lots of favorable comments on both for the site, and there were mostly 100% favorable on the siting of alternative 1 and how the public space worked there and how the 2 kind of held together as a whole project. So we thought if we went ahead and tried to make them truly separate buildings, but still close enough together that they shoot sparks across, that we'd have a better chance of it being a successful project. So it's kind of an interpretation thing, but reading through those comments, that's how we kind of interpreted it.
Okay, well, I think that based on those comments and the way I read them, I would have to agree with you. I also like the fact that this particular alternative is less environmentally impactful. I think that has a lot to do with it. That was one of the reasons I liked alternative 1 to begin with. I had changed my mind because of the comments to go to alternative 3, but I think I like alternative 4 the best. So starting out the conversation for which one I would prefer it would be alternative 4.
Council President Daughtry, can we get a motion?
Well, I thought we were still in discussion. I don't know if you want a motion. I could put a motion out there. Sure. I would move to move forward with the discussions of the Civic Center Library project, looking at alternative 4 as the primary goal.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to accept alternative 4, and I have a second. Do we have discussion on that motion?
Of course, I have a question. Would that mean that we would run these as a single goal rather than separate buildings? What is your thought on that? Just to clarify that.
So
separate buildings, but not necessarily built separately at the separate times. That's a different discussion.
Right.
Separate buildings as he has it depicted here.
Right. No, of course.
Does that answer your question?
No, what I mean is would they be separate projects or would it be one ask to the vote?
That is not a part of the. That's not a part of my.
All right, then never mind. Disregard. It's 2 hours later here. Just remember that.
Any other discussion on this motion?
I just, want to put forth that I struggle a little bit with the volume of public comment and the clear desire and direction from the community to look at alternative 3 and sort of what feels like the decision to go back and develop a hybrid that doesn't incorporate that feedback. So I struggle a little bit with moving forward with a hybrid model.
I think it does incorporate what they were trying to allude to in the Model 3. So that's one of the reasons I went with the modified 4.
Just to clarify, the library has funding.
Yes.
No, the library has some. The library has 1.5 million.
So that doesn't cover, and they don't have a bond to cover this, which got failed twice already, correct? Okay, we're talking about a project to co-locate with a library that doesn't have the funding for a project and move this agenda forward. Just making sure I understand that's what we're doing here. Okay, great. Just want to make sure.
Well, know that the library has already received $3.1 million from the state and that they have other funds that will be another $3 million. So they do have some money already for this project. Just so you know, that $6 million is my understanding.
Okay, any other discussion on this motion?
I did want to, Councilmember George said, I didn't know if I fully understood the concern you share. Would you mind maybe restating that so I can better understand that?
Yeah, I just think that there was a lot of effort and time put into soliciting public comment, in multiple ways. We had lots of folks share really detailed feedback and ideas about, what they wanted and why they felt like alternative 3 was the best fit for our community. And I just always feel as though there's a real danger in aggressively soliciting public comment and then making a different decision. I understand that the hybrid model is attempting to incorporate some of that feedback. I think if this ends up passing, it'll be important how this gets messaged back to our community, in particular, those folks who took the time to participate in those sessions.
So to Councilmember Jorstad's point, thank you for sharing those thoughts again. I'm just looking at the table here about the comments. 54% really liked alternative 3. Alternative 2 had 5% and alternative 1 had 26%. So the disparity, and then if you look at the general favorability, the next that like it, you have 74% roughly that like or really like alternative 3. and the next best is about 54%. So it's about at least 50% more for alternative 3. So I think Angie or Councilmember Jorstad raises a really good point.
And I'm not questioning that. That is not. I'm not sure that. So when I started out this and got this in here, what I'm trying to point out that the consultants had taken some of the comments that were and were able to distill those out, and those comments were keeping the buildings separate. And then they tried to say, okay, can we keep the buildings separate and still gain some environmental mitigation by going to this hybrid model? So if you just pretend like, okay, take out I want the building separate out of there, but make sure we keep the buildings separate in the new hybrid, you're still affording those people that wanted to keep the buildings separate what they wanted by going to the hybrid 4. We're still keeping the buildings separate. In other words, there's no connectivity between the buildings, physical connectivity. You're still doing what they wanted. And you're gaining other things that we wanted in some of the other alternatives, like alternative 1, where we're not getting into the environmental mitigation that we need to. So that's my point, and that's why I like alternative 4. It actually meets the requirements of basically everybody.
And I do agree with Kim, and I understand that the people need to feel like they were listened to. I don't like making decisions that make us look like we aren't listening to the citizens. I do believe that Mr. Stowe and Mr. Jobs did a very good job of listening. They did a very good job of researching and opening doors for people during this pandemic. It was really amazing that they were able to do all of that. And one of the things that you often heard was people wanted this to be environmentally correct, and rather than ruining the wetlands and not taking advantage of the beauty of that spot. And I think their hybrid does a very good job of that. To me, I think they did listen to the people, and this comes from somebody who was determined to vote for 3 tonight. And I believe they listened. And sometimes it's messaging that we have to get the message out there so that people understand that we did listen, and that we do understand why they cared about these being 2 separate buildings. That's just how I feel. I'm at peace with that hybrid.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And, I'll admit I was in the minority. I was one of the people that was in favor of 1. And I talked about that the last time we brought this up, but I feel like this is a good compromise between all points. There was no, while alternative number 2 was obviously the clear minority of preference, there's elements that can be taken out of all the comments and all of the alternatives so that everybody gets a little piece of ownership in this project. And, compromise is important. It's really how we move these things forward. And I feel like Mr. Jobs and Mr. Stowe did a great job really kind of getting into the details of why people are saying what they was their preference, and trying to put all those things together. So I definitely support alternative 4 from the terms of compromise. My personal favorite is still number 1, but compromise is what compromise is.
All right, so after that deliberation, we do have a motion on the floor to accept alternative number 4. So with that, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
So we have, and any abstained? Okay, so no abstentions. So we have a pass. Just note that council member George Satt was the
no vote. Yep.
The knee voice. I
The
don't know.
lone dissenter.
It's getting to be super long day. So with that, I will ensure that you're probably going to be happy if I can get a head nod from Council President Daughtry. I checked with Russ, and we can forego item N as in Nora, if you're okay with that for the next council meeting.
I was hoping we could have an extended presentation.
Yeah, I've got multiple north-souths with heads, so I'm good with that. So with that, let's move to executive session, and let's remember that you need to pause, turn off your video here, and then move over to Teams.
So Mayor, there will be possible action, correct?
That's correct. Possible action will be about 15 minutes.
And this is on property acquisition. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yep.
It's gonna be tricky.
You guys need us to stick around? I lost track there.
No, Mike, I think you're good.
Okay, thank you. Good to spend time with you guys.
Good night.
Kelly, can you send me an email of the link for the Teams meeting?
Sure. And I'm going to mute you here, okay?
Kelly, is Mary not going to be able to come over?
No, I think she is. I needed to send it to a different email. I'm sending it to her right now.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Mary, I just sent that to you.
Okay, I'm going to try to do it on my city phone. See if I can do that.
Okay,
Kelly.
I can mute you here though.
Kelly,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to send me a link as well. I'm having trouble getting Teams to open up.
All righty. I will send it to you now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we have everybody back from executive session. So with that, do we have any motion coming out of the executive session?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the mayor to sign a purchase and sale agreement on lot 21 and lot 22, Glenwood Division, for the purchase price of $3.8 million from the Costco.
I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion, deliberation on that subject?
I would like to excuse myself from this vote, as I'll be abstaining from the vote, as I have a personal conflict with this.
Okay. Clerk Challen, if you could note that, please.
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Daughtry, just could you repeat the motion just one more time? It would be really helpful for me.
Move to allow the mayor to sign a purchase and sale agreement for lot 21 and 22 of the Glenwood Division to the Costco Corporation, the amount of $3.8 million.
It's 3.81.
It could be 3.81
Thank you.
and change.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right.
Please note the one abstention.
And we do have the one abstention.
Councilmember Taunton.
Yep.
Extension.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, good work tonight. I know it was a long night, good discussions on things. And so go enjoy your families, and hopefully we'll see you at the farmer's market tomorrow.
Not me.
Good night, Mary.
Good night, everyone.